number 10 we have the Sabbatus Well. It's a creepy old well that sits at the back of a long established graveyard. Just from that information alone you know that this well isn't going to be used for wishing. If you did try to use it to grant your wishes, they would all come at a great consequence, like if they came from the devil himself. No, actually the outcome is much more terrifying. Legend says that a few boys were playing truth or dare, and one of the boys dared another boy to get lowered into the haunted Sabbatus Well. With masculinity being as fragile as a package that just got punted to your door by a UPS driver, the boy took the challenge without hesitation. The group walked down to the creepy old well like the gang from Scooby-Doo, tied a rope to a tire swing, and then slowly lowered their friend into the darkness of this pit. They heard some screams and then silence. They quickly brought him back up, and he wasn't their friend anymore. Well, he was, but he had been aged. He looked as if he was 90 years old, with wrinkled skin and see-through hair, and his mind had been lost. Their former friend just laughed uncontrollably. He now sits in the insane asylum. So if you want to have a good time, lower your friend into the Sabbatus Well and see if they get cursed. Who knows? At number 9 we have the Seguin Island Lighthouse. If you haven't seen the movie The Lighthouse, go see it. It's amazing. And it's stories like this that give the inspiration for movies like that. The Seguin Lighthouse was once a home for a lovely couple. The lighthouse is on an isolated island, so the couple had to make the best of each other's time. To try and pass the sorrows of seclusion, his wife would play the piano. But here's the catch. She didn't know how to improv music. She only knew how to follow sheets, and they only had one sheet of music. This legend is before they had the internet. The constant repetition of the reoccurring tune made the dude go crazy. He took an axe and sliced the piano open, followed by his wife's head. Legend says that you can hear the horrific screams coming from the lighthouse and the tune that she used to play. At number 8 we have the Poco Moonshine Lake Monster. An urban legend list isn't complete without some sort of monster or lady in the woods, and this one has all the standard pieces. Has anyone ever taken a picture of this creature? Of course not, even though everyone has cameras on their phones all the time now. Has there been rumors about the existence of this monster for a very long time? Yes, absolutely. Tales about the creature from the Poco Moonshine Lake date all the way back to the 1870s. Does this creature have a long snake-like body, sort of like a dinosaur or a Loch Ness monster? You betcha. And is it a ridiculous size? Well, apparently it is 60 to 70 feet long, so I would say that's pretty damn big. That's actually bigger than a colossal squid. I feel like it would be pretty hard for something like that to find enough food to eat in a lake. And with all our technology we have, like the radar and everything, how have we not been able to locate this type of creature? Or does it have some sort of futuristic anti-radar tech that we don't know about? That's why we are hunting these things, because they hold the secret tech that could strengthen our military. Really, when it comes to lake monsters, I am a non-believer, but all of you at home, decide for yourselves. At number 7 we have Colonel Buck's tomb. Hey, don't mess with witches or they will ruin your life even after you die. Apparently in life, Colonel Jonathan Buck was quite the witch hunter, but after burning one witch at the stake, her leg covered in a stocking rolled out of the fire and touched him. This was the witch's way of cursing him. Now it's said that on his tomb there is a stain in the shape of a woman's stocking that is impossible to remove. Some suspect that this is the witch letting everyone know that she is tormenting him in the afterlife. At number 6 we have the haunting of Tokolexis. In 1696 a Native American chief was sentenced to death at Fort William Henry, probably for some trumped up charges. It was 1696. If you look into American and Canadian history, you'll find that we have never been very nice to our Native American people. But he was set to be hung on a tree right outside the fort. Everyone in town gathered for this, because that's what people would do back then. They loved these public executions. And when Tokolexis was given his last words, all he said was live. It seemed a little confusing to the people who were watching, but apparently he was giving instructions for where he wanted his soul to go after he died. He wanted it to stay right in the tree he was hung on. His spirit is said to be there to this day. People say they can hear his voice on a quiet night, and you can see a white orb hovering around the tree, which is supposed to be him. At number 5 we have the Robbie Andrews dorms. The dormitories of the University of Southern Maine isn't just for partying and playing Super Smash Bros. There are also a bunch of ghosts that walk the halls and harass everyone who lives there. Now there are reports of ghosts from all over the campus, but this dorm grabs the most attention because it is the oldest building. The building was erected in the 19th century, and since then there have been a few suicides on the property. Every year students spread rumors that ghosts of students who have killed themselves still walk the halls to this day, preying on anyone who has a hot plate in their room. You know that's against dorm rules. At number 4 we have the Wood Island Lighthouse. I mean, it's Maine. It's not surprising that there's more than one lighthouse on this list. It's by the sea and has some of the best clam chowder that has ever existed. Can we just take a minute and appreciate how good clam chowder is? It's so good. Okay, now back to the lighthouse. Back in 1896, there was a murder-suicide that took place there. The lighthouse was rented out by Howard Hobbs, who was a bit of a drunk and bad with money. Not the ideal tenant. One night Hobbs' landlord, Fred Milliken, popped by the lighthouse. He needed to talk to Hobbs about the rent. The problem was that Hobbs hadn't paid the rent in a couple months. The conversation got heated, which led to Hobbs shooting Milliken and then killing himself. Now the whole place is said to be haunted by their ghosts. I wonder if they still hate each other. Like, you haunt that side, I haunt this side. Thanks to you, I'm a lighthouse ghost for the rest of time. We have the curse of the Saco River. There isn't enough data to confirm how much of this story is true, but I will give you what I know and then you can decide for yourselves what to believe. Somewhere in the 16th century, a group of men were out and wanted to torment a Native American tribe who lived next to the Saco River. They were drunk, they found a Native American mother and her child walking next to the river, grabbed them, took them, and then threw them off the edge of the river, which was a massive waterfall. They did this for a laugh. This is pretty horrible. Both of them died. The husband and father of these two people was the town shaman. Obviously, he was horrified and angered by what these men had just done, so he decided he wanted revenge, not just on them, but for the rest of time. The village idolized a river monster that was said to live deep in the Saco River. He prayed to this monster and it listened. He asked that it would kill 3 white men each year, which is honestly so fair. That's a very reasonable number. At number 2, we have the Haynesville Woods couple. See, I told you, a list isn't complete without a monster in a lake and a ghost in the woods. I'm providing you all the tropes because frankly, I love them. The cheesier an urban legend is, the better chance it has to make it onto one of my lists. The Haynesville Woods is haunted by a bride and groom who met their end driving home from their wedding. The groom was hammered. Obviously, he just left his wedding. You should probably get an Uber in this kind of situation. Well, I'm fairly certain that there was no internet when this legend took place, and drinking and driving back then was something people would just shrug at. He lost control of the car and smashed into a tree and died on impact. The bride, however, was still alive. She pulled herself out of the window to go look for help, but this was in the middle of winter and she was only wearing a wedding dress. No one was coming by and she walked along the road until she froze to death. The couple's ghosts can be seen wandering around the woods to this day. And for the number 1 spot, we have the North Pond Hermit. A man living in the woods, sneaking into people's homes. He would steal food, take their books, and he never spoke to anyone in 27 years. He never lit a fire to stay warm, he was never seen by anyone, and sometimes when food was running low, he would take people's children. Okay, everything is true except for that last part about the children. That's not true, I made that up. But all the rest of it is 100% true. One day Christopher Knight decided he had enough of society, drove his car up to the woods and abandoned civilization forever. He lived in the woods alone for almost 3 decades and probably would have lived there a lot longer if he was never found. People started filing police reports that there were break-ins happening in their cabins around the North Pond. Eventually police went searching and found him all tucked away. The charges were soft, so he was let out of custody quickly, but everyone wanted to know why this guy decided to do what he did. And if you want to know, then you can check out one of the many podcasts he has done because there's so much information on this guy. And he also has written a book, The Stranger in the Woods, the extraordinary story of the last true hermit.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Ed, Edd, and Eddy. Ed, Edd, and Eddy ran for 5 seasons, and it's been rumored that among all these episodes that were aired, there was one that went missing and was only shown once on TV before it never aired again. The rumor started in 2001, and it was alleged that this missing episode was called The Scarecrow Boy. For a short summary of the episode, Sarah puts on a play, her own version of The Wizard of Oz, casting herself as Dorothy, Jimmy as the Tin Man, Eddie as the Cowardly Lion, Ed as the Scarecrow, and Double D as the director. After rehearsing, Sarah becomes so mad at Ed for messing up his lines that she decides to lock him out of the house. Since he was in his costume when this happened, the other kids in the neighborhood began making fun of him, calling him Scarecrow Boy. Even crazier, every time he is called Scarecrow Boy, he becomes stiffer, eventually turning into one. There's pretty much no evidence that this episode ever existed, other than fans claiming that they once watched it on TV. In our number 9 spot today, we have Inspector Gadget. In the show Inspector Gadget, we never see the evil Dr. Claw's face on screen. However, there's been a long-standing urban legend that we did see him at one point. In this one mysterious episode, we got a glimpse of his face, and that was later used as the inspiration inspiration for the action figure of Dr. Claw, which now shows his face. The creators knew this was a huge deal at the time, and when you went to buy the action figure in stores, they covered up his face in the packaging, so you had to buy it back in the day to see what Mr. Claw looked like. These days, you can just Google it and it'll be the first thing that pops up. His face is also briefly visible in the Inspector Gadget game for the Super Nintendo, but since the quality of the game was pretty bad, we never got a good look until the action figure. In our number 8 spot today, we have Dungeons & Dragons. In a 1980s Dungeons & Dragons cartoon show, there is a famous urban legend that the last episode of the show shared a crazy secret about the entire show that changes everything. The episode itself also reportedly never made it to TV, but some people claimed that it was accidentally aired once. This episode revealed that all of the characters were actually killed in a roller coaster accident, and they ended up in the afterlife. The writer who made the real final episode has denied these claims numerous times, and he even uploaded his script to prove it. In the ending, the kids deliberated after being offered a choice whether to go back to Earth or continue fighting in the D&D world. In our number 7 spot today, we have Gravity Falls. The story with the show Gravity Falls was that allegedly it was supposed to be 3 seasons, but was cut down to only 2 seasons after Alex Hirsch decided he wanted to wrap up the show. Apparently, many fans think that there were a lot of unanswered questions that would have been answered in this rumored 3rd season. The source of this idea comes from a Reddit AMA done after the season 1 finale, where a fan asked how many seasons he'd ideally like the show to last, with Hirsch's response being that he originally considered 3 seasons but now believed that was too much. Hirsch would say many times over the years that the show was never planned to have 3 seasons, and blames the rumor on the fact that he was not allowed to announce that season 2 was the last season when he first learned so. In our number 6 spot today, we have Phineas and Ferb. Phineas and Ferb is one of those cartoons where there are so many strange theories, it's hard to know where to start. But the most insane one that I have ever heard of claims that Dr. Doofenshmirtz, the evil madman, is actually the father of Phineas. The main evidence is that Phineas and Doofenshmirtz both have the same shaped heads. Let's break this down. We know that Linda, Phineas's mom, and Doof actually dated way back, so not hard to assume that they could have birthed a child. The story is that the couple dated when they were both really young and eventually split up. Both of them go on to get married to other people and have kids with them. That explains Candace's father. After a few years, Linda either splits from Candace's dad and has a fling with Doof, or she cheats with Doof. Either way, it results in the birth of Phineas. Then, years later, she meets Ferb's dad, they get married, and then they turn into one big family. In our number 5 spot today, we have Strawberry Shortcake. Okay, so basically this isn't necessarily inherently terrifying, but it's kind of crazy to see the power of rumors and how even while the truth is out there, some people will still believe falsities. Basically, this story has to do with Strawberry Shortcake and how there was some troll out there who claimed to be the niece of someone working for the entertainment company that makes the show. Basically, this person went on to spread a ton of rumors, mostly relating to season 4, that includes a ton of false synopsis, and they even manipulated some audio and released it as proof. In the end, this of course was bound to cause trouble, so people began trying to clear the air, and of course once the season was actually released, it was clear that this troll had just released a bunch of lies. In the end, however, despite all of the proof that these were false claims, there are many people out there who still choose to reject the truth and take these lies as reality. In our number 4 spot today, we have Mickey Mouse. So basically this is a legend that starts out 100% true. Basically it starts out saying that on September 1st, 1939, the BBC broadcast of the Mickey Mouse cartoon Mickey's Gala premiere was abruptly interrupted and ceased due to the sudden outbreak of World War II. That's terrible, and it's absolutely terrifying. The legend goes on to claim that after the war ended and when broadcasts resumed, that the episode was picked up in the exact same moment as when it had previously been interrupted all those years ago. That certainly would have been slightly symbolic, but also exceptionally eerie, but it turns out that that is not true. While it is true that the cartoon was indeed the last program shown by the BBC before suspension, it aired in its entirety before the interruption in 1939, as well as after the interruption in 1946. It is believed that this legend came from a 1984 documentary which showed exactly what the legend described, but this was likely placed in the documentary for dramatic effect. In our number 3 spot today, we have Gravity Falls 2. For another Gravity Falls urban legend, we have this one that circulated the internet. Basically, it comes in the form of a screenshot that shows Dipper and Mabel with a slender man standing there watching them from behind. Definitely creepy, but turns out that this is in fact not real. The actual episode shows no slender man, and creator Alex Hirsch actually commented on this legend in an interview. He noted that one of the very first times he overheard someone talking about the show after its premiere was when he heard someone telling another person that the legend was true. Despite this rumor not being true at all, there is actually a Slender Man appearance in Gravity Falls media, and it's a one-panel cameo in the story titled Face It, which is in the graphic novel Gravity Falls Lost Legends. In our number 2 spot today we have Hey Arnold. Hey Arnold is an absolutely classic cartoon, but this legend surrounding the episode titled Pigeon Man is quite dark. Basically, in this episode there's a character who is called the Pigeon Man, and the legend suggests that in the original ending of this episode, he takes his own life after finding his home destroyed. The legend continues on to say that Nickelodeon forced the writers to change the ending because they were worried it was too dark, and if this were true, I would certainly be inclined to agree. In the end, however, this legend was in fact debunked by the show creator himself, Craig Bartlett. That was never the intended ending, and I think that's probably a good thing. In the actual ending of the show, the Pigeon Man flies away with the pigeons, and because of this dark rumor, people speculate that this was actually his death, but that is also likely untrue because of his subsequent appearances later on. In our number 1 spot today we have King of the Hill. King of the Hill had one episode that was subject to the internet's weirdest and darkest rumors. The episode in question is called Pygmalion. The episode as a whole is wild, and it's really dark and creepy, which is exactly why it isn't really a surprise that there's a dark legend surrounding it. Basically, in this episode, there's a character called Trip Larson who suffers from quite a few serious things, and he also inherited the Larson's pork products plant from his father. Long story short, he does some messed up stuff and ends up meeting a gruesome fate in the end. I'll spare you the gory details. So basically, according to urban legend, it says that after Trip's death, while Peggy and Luann are talking and celebrating, you can see an incredibly graphic and dark image of Trip's body behind them. There is simply no evidence that this ever happened, and it's likely just a really dark story that had its origins somewhere on the internet, but you really just wonder exactly where this sort of thing came from.
Starting off number 10 now, we have The Haunted Mansion. Mansion, haunting, name a more iconic duo. Oh wait, this ghost story comes from the Luna Mansion in Las Lunas. It was built in 1880 by the wealthy Luna Otero family, and it stayed in their family for the next 90 years. Eventually, they sold it though, at which point it was turned into a restaurant. The new owners began to realize why the family may have sold the mansion though when guests first reported the hauntings. Perhaps that was what drove the Luna Otero family out of the property in the first place. A female ghost is the most common story and consistently appears in accounts of the building. They say she is wearing 1920s clothing and looks incredibly real. Now we're talking real as in she looks like flesh and bones, right there in front of you, not some sort of spectral wisp. The most common place she's seen in is an old rocking chair on the second floor. That's creepy. Investigators have proposed a theory that she's the ghost of Josefina Otero, a former owner of the house who is still sort of tending to the upkeep of the building even in death. She seems to have no interest to interact with the living. She simply sits and walks and sits and walks, eternally locked in the place she once called home. Next up at number 9 now, we have the Ghost Lovers. Legend says that the Double Eagle restaurant in the town of Mesilla is haunted by 2 teenage ghost lovers. Their names are Armando and Inez. Armando was the son of a wealthy family who owned the house, while Inez was one of the housemaids. The pair fell in love, but when Armando's mother found out, she fired Inez and banished her from the house. The village supported their love and helped them keep their romance a secret from the boy's parents. One day though, the mother came home early and found the two in Armando's bedroom. She was so outraged, she grabbed her sewing shears and in the struggle, however, she accidentally stabbed her own son. Armando died 3 days later. His spirit joined Inez's spirit in the house, which went on to become the Double Eagle restaurant. These days, the employees and some customers of the restaurant have told tales of their encounters with the ghosts of Armando and Inez, the teenage ghost lovers. Moving on to number 8 now, we have La Mala Hora. In English, that name is translated as the Evil Hour or the Evil One. She is said to be a wicked spirit, an evil demon that wanders the country roads of New Mexico at night. She walks and waits at crossroads until she finds someone traveling alone, then her time comes. She is usually first seen as a sort of large black lump, ever moving, ever changing shape. It can also change size rapidly, growing larger and smalling, a disorientating sight to see. Witnesses have likened this to a ghostly black shroud or a large black cotton ball. Anyone who looks at the evil one is driven insane. They are hypnotized, then paralyzed, and then when they are at their most defenseless, they are enveloped and suffocated. The next morning, the body is found dead at the side of the road. Locals are often reluctant to talk about all of this. Some only refer to it as an evil thing. Those that do talk say that the evil one seldom appears in human form, but when it does, it appears as a wicked old woman dressed in black with long flowing hair. Seeing her is considered to be a death omen. Encountering her is said to be a sign that the person or someone they know is going to die soon. Next up, number 7 now, we have the Haunted Chemo Theatre. This movie theatre opened in Albuquerque in 1927. A year after its construction, Oresti Bachichi, the owner, died suddenly, leaving the theatre to his sons. They turned it into a success, bringing in shows to the theatre to run alongside the movies. Eventually though, tragedy struck. In 1951, a 6-year-old boy named Bobby Darnell was killed when the boiler in the basement exploded, demolishing part of the lobby. Bobby had been standing on the balcony in the lobby with some of his friends. Suddenly he was scared by something on the screen and ran down to the staircase to the lobby. Just as he arrived, the boiler exploded, taking Bobby and part of the lobby with it. Legend says that Bobby's spirit has remained there ever since. They say he's now a trickster that causes problems during performances. In order to appease him, the cast of a play will actually hang donuts on the water pipes that run along the back wall of the theatre behind the stage. Often the treats are gone the next morning, or if there is a donut left, they'll find a tiny little bite mark on it. Moving on to number 6 now, we have the Dawson Coal Mine. In 1901, the Dawson Coal Mine opened and a railroad was built that linked the new town of Dawson with Tucumcari. The town of Dawson was born and grew. It had its own newspaper, theatre, hotel, hospital, and even a bowling alley. Amazing. On October 22nd, 1913, tragedy struck though, when an explosion in the nearby mine killed 263 miners plus 2 rescuers. Less than 10 years later, another explosion killed 120 men. The town didn't fall apart though, it continued on all the way until 1950. When the mine closed in that year though, the company sold the whole town, buildings and all, to be carried off to other locations. All that remains today is Dawson's Cemetery, making it a ghost town in more than one way. Paranormal hunters have been drawn there for the past 70 years. They say they've seen misty apparitions and glowing lights near the cemetery gravestones. Legend says the lights are actually the headlights of the dead miners' helmets. Moving on now to number 5, we have La Lorna. Now some of you may have heard me talk about this in other urban legends videos. It's prevalent across the southern US states and New Mexico is no different. In the New Mexico version, the weeping woman is the ghost of a mother who drowned her children. When she fully realized what she had done, she was overcome with grief. She would not eat and walked along the river in her white gown searching for her boys, hoping they would come back to her. She cried and cried endlessly as she roamed the riverbanks and her gown became soiled and torn. When she continued to refuse to eat, she grew thinner and appeared taller until she looked like a huge walking skeleton. There, by the river, she finally died and her spirit began to walk the same route that she did. Her weeping and wailing became a curse of the night, and the people who lived along the Santa Fe River were too afraid to go out after dark. They say she can still be seen drifting between the trees or floating on the river itself with her long white gown spread out across the waters, and she wails, always wailing and wailing and wailing. Moving on to number 4 now, we have the Eternal Shootout. In the town of Corrales lies the Rancho de Corrales. It's an old Spanish estate once owned by a man called Diego Montoya. It was bought by a couple, Luis and Luisa Humberto. Now 5 years after their purchase, Luis found out that his wife was cheating on him. Luis killed his wife in a fit of rage, which sparked a gun battle with the locals soon after. He was in the exchange, and only then did the guns fall silent. It wasn't long after the burial that locals began to hear echoes of this day around them. Ever since then, legend says the shootout has been going on in this place eternally, forever unresolved, still just as bloody and violent as the day it occurred. People report hearing voices and seeing a woman dressed in 19th century clothing moving through the property. Unfortunately, the building was all but destroyed in a strange fire in 2012. Some say the legend went with it, others say that the spirits will never leave leave their shootout. Next up at number 3 now, we have the Haunted Insane Asylum, another iconic duo, I guess you could say. This one can be found in Albuquerque's North Valley, built in the 1900s. According to local legends, the facility was once run by an evil, twisted doctor who experimented on patients, even children. This would often result in their deaths. Witnesses say these murdered patients now haunt the very site and that people feel a deep sense of oppression when they're nearby. More than that, some visitors have said the abandoned site is home to a creepy, dark figure that follows them around, the same one that has appeared in photographs over the years. In 2014, the local sheriff's office announced plans to send extra police officers there. Now, they said this was because of trespassers, but other people have theorized that the police may have been sent there to investigate the strange goings on, and their silence since then has been quite suspicious. Moving on to number 2 now, we have the Children's Hospital. In 1910, Clyde and Carrie Tingley moved to New Mexico. Over the years, they set about making their dream come true of helping sick children. Carrie Tingley Children's Hospital was opened in 1937 to treat children with polio. However, new medical advancements meant that the hospital began treating children with a wide array of medical disorders, mostly orthopedic and including but not limited to scoliosis, club feet, cerebral palsy and spina bifida. The pain and suffering that the children experienced there is said to have left an eternal imprint on the hospital itself. According to witnesses, you can still hear the sounds of children crying, voices echoing through the halls, and even a heartbeat can be heard in the empty areas. And finally, number 1 now, we have the humming. I love this one. The Taos hum is perhaps the most famous hum in the world. Over the years, residents of the town of Taos have reported hearing a humming sound, a low frequency noise with a rhythmic pulse to it. Many people that live there say it sounds like a faraway diesel engine. It's no laughing matter either. In 1993, the citizens actually petitioned the American Congress to investigate the source of the humming. A report found that most hearers initially experience a hum with an abrupt beginning, as if some device had just been switched on. They say it caused dizziness, insomnia, disorientation, pressure on the ears, headaches, and even nosebleeds. Many of them thought there was some sort of connection between the humming and the US government. They thought they were hearing the sound of a covert military or naval operation. Although Taos has become the focus of the humming research, it's actually become a worldwide phenomenon. Take a look at the full story and see if you have any good theories.
Coming in at number 10, we have Hellgate Bridge. I mean, if you're gonna name your bridge Hellgate Bridge, you really are asking for trouble. In fairness, the bridge is named after the tidal strait it crosses in the East River, but still, know what sounds like Hellgate? Fellgate. Rename that bridge. The bridge connects Queens to Randall's Island, and it is an on-brand red color. There are a number of urban legends connected to the bridge, including rumors of a lurking beneath its arches. However, the main legends here surround the ghost trains. According to local lore, the bridge is haunted by an old train whose passengers are the city's damned. Those who find themselves on the bridge at night report seeing strange lights thundering towards them before they disappear. Others report seeing old, battered trains floating over the river. The legend says that the carriages are filled with people who have lost their lives in the water. Now, these range from murder victims, people who have fallen short of the mafia, suicide jumpers, and historic Dutch explorers. They sit together on the weirdest train ride of all time. Coming in at number 9, we have the legend of Cropsey. Cropsey is Staten Island's very own boogeyman, but the legend coincides with some real-life terrifying stuff. Now, Cropsey was rumored to be a killer with a hook for a hand who had escaped from a mental institution and hunted children. Cropsey was said to live in an old abandoned asylum, the Willbrook Mental Institution. He would then come out late at night and children off the streets, them with his hook. In other variants of the story, he would have a bloody axe. Whichever the way it was told, he was out there. Parents would use Cropsey to warn kids not to miss their curfews. Others would use him to tease one another at sleepovers. Sadly, the legend became mixed up in reality in the 1970s and 80s when Staten Island children really started to disappear. Andre Rand started working at the Willowbrook State School, a school for children with learning disabilities that turned out to actually be a very awful and unnurturing place for many reasons. Rand worked there and he abducted and murdered 5 children. He was finally caught in 1987 when a young girl with Down syndrome, Jennifer Schweiger, went missing. According to an acclaimed documentary on the subject, Rand may have been involved in Satanism and was possibly killing the children as ritual sacrifices. Coming into number 8, this city has 8 million rats. NYC dwellers will tell you that the population of rats will soon outnumber the population of people living in the 5 boroughs. Rats, of course, are terrifying for a good number of reasons. They're vermin, they're unclean, they spread disease. Hello, plague anyone? While there are a whole load of rats living in New York City, there's actually around 1 rat to every 4 dwellers, so around 2 million rats, which is a lot of rats, but not 8 million. There will only ever be one pizza rat though, so shout out to him. We could actually do a whole top 10 on the various legends of New York City rats. Some people even think that giant or mutant rats are running riot down there. Cool. Coming into number 7, we have the ghost ship of the Hudson River. The Hudson River separates New York and New Jersey and runs all the way from the ocean up to Albany. The river is an iconic part of New York City and has urban legends of its very own. One popular story is the legend of the Half Moon, the famous ship sailed by Henry Hudson, the namesake of the river. Hudson was lost at sea in 1611, although his ship is sometimes spotted sailing the famous river. One man named Samuel was fishing along the Hudson one evening before a storm when he saw a wooden ship with 3 empty masts. Samuel was confused as he had never seen a boat like this in his life, and he said it drifted 50 feet away from him before disappearing. It seems the legend goes that the half moon is only spotted when times are rough on the river. It serves as a warning for people to stay on dry land until the bad weather passes. Coming into number 6, we have the buried treasure of Liberty Island. Here be treasure and ghosts. Captain William Kidd was a Scottish pirate who sailed on many an adventure, but he was especially known for his illicit activity around New York City. The famous pirate was said to have stashed a boatload of bounty on Liberty Island, which in those days existed without its famous statue and was called Bedloe Island. After his death in 1701 for piracy, people started looking for Captain Kidd's loot. 2 soldiers, Gibbs and Carpenter, went to look for the treasure. They literally thought they'd struck gold when they came across a wooden chest. Before they could open it, they were sat upon by what they described as a demon with black skin, horns, and wings. This evil apparition is said to guard the treasure to this day and still stalks Liberty Island at night. Wonder what Lady Libs feels about her neighbor. Coming into number 5, we have killer pennies off the Empire State Building. Ever heard the one about people throwing pennies or cents off the Empire State? With the momentum they pick up from being dropped at such a height, they can allegedly innocent people standing below. This is a very popular Manhattan urban legend and genuinely makes people nervous when walking around the base of the iconic building. This is just a scare story though. It's an urban legend. A penny's terminal velocity, the fastest it can fall through air, is 25 miles per hour. Now even when dropped at 1,250 feet, it wouldn't kill someone on the ground. It would hurt for sure, but it wouldn't kill. To be honest, there are so many safety precautions these days that it is very unlikely anyone would be able to launch a projectile off the top of the building. Coming into number 4, we have this secret bunker. I love me a tin hat conspiracy. Legend has it that there is 500 square acres of subterranean city 100 feet under Central Park. Theorists call this secret bunker the Manhattan Project, although I don't know if they know that that name was already taken. These theorists though do think that the secret project predates the atomic bomb, so maybe. To accompany the theory, there is a rather in-depth website that claims that the bunker was built in 1853 and there is still active use going on down there. The site shows picture evidence of the bunker and its clandestine entrances around the park. The site also claims that the bunker is the property of the US government and that both Tsar Nicholas, the overthrown king of Russia, and were rescued and lived out their lives there. Under Central Park. Cool. Oh, did I say Tsar Nicholas and Hitler and forgot to mention the aliens? Right. Also, it seems that the Roswell aliens were supposed to have lived down there too. Cool. Sure. Keeping it in Central Park, we have the legend of the ice skating sisters at number 3. This urban legend dates back to a pair of siblings, the Van der Voot sisters, who lived with their overprotective wealthy father in his Manhattan townhouse in the 19th century. Their father, a widower, would rarely let his daughters leave the house, and when they did, they weren't allowed to go far. The furthest he would let them go out would be to ice skate on the 59th Street Pond, located at the southeast section of the park. They enjoyed this tiny, tiny slice of freedom so much. Now both siblings unfortunately died spinsters within months of each other in 1880. Around 35 years later, during the First World War, stories started circulating of the 2 sisters seen gliding over the 59th Street Pond. Now the sightings have occurred frequently ever since, and in all weathers. together. The pond doesn't have to be frozen for this to escape. The pair are seen in Victoria-era dresses, one wearing red and the other wearing purple. The sisters enjoy such fame as an urban legend that even the New York Times ran an article on them in 1997. Coming into number 2, we have John Lennon and the ghost of the Dakota Building. So just across the road from Central Park is the Dakota Building. It's a New York City landmark. Built in 1884, it was already shrouded in mystery and paranormal whisperings before providing the backdrop to John Lennon's murder in 1980. The former Beatle, of course, was shot outside the front steps by David Chapman. John lived in the building with Yoko Ono, who claims to have seen his ghost sitting in their apartment ever since. She isn't the only one who has seen his apparition either. In 1983, Joey Harrow and Amanda Maud saw him standing at the entrance looking pensive. It seems John is just one of a number of ghosts haunting the famous building. Lennon himself said that he saw a spirit of the crying lady. This is supposed to be the ghost of a former manager of the building. The Dakota is also said to be haunted by the ghost of a young blonde girl in a yellow taffeta dress. Residents of the building to this day still report a lot of strange goings on. Finally, coming into number 1, we have one of the most famous NYC urban legends. Behold the legend of the sewer alligators. In New York City, there has been a legend for decades upon decades that alligators exist in the sewer. The urban legend dates back to the 1930s and goes that wealthy people would bring baby gators back from their trips to Florida and the southeastern states. When the gators got too much for them, they'd simply flush them down the toilet and the snappy chappies would end up in the sewer, where they'd breed with other abandoned pets. In 1932, the New York Times reported an alligator spotted along the Bronx riverbank, and 3 years later, teenagers told news outlets that they saw one crawl out of the sewer. People still claim to see gators in New York City today, despite many refuting the claims. That being said, a 2-foot caiman was caught in Central Park in 2001, so the legend more than prevails.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have the City Tavern. The City Tavern was constructed in Philadelphia in 1773. It was one of the grandest buildings in America at that time. In the century since, locals have lost count of how many stories are attached to the building. It's seen wars, death and tragedies, seemingly soaking up into the energy of that building forever. One story tells of a waiter who died in a duel there in 1790. The aftermath was horrific. His bloody apparition is sometimes seen falling to the ground in the tavern. He also moves tables and silverware around. In another tale, a bride-to-be was preparing in the tavern for her ceremony. During all the preparation, nobody noticed a candle had set fire to a curtain. The flame turned into a fire that quickly engulfed the room and then the whole building. The young woman died in the fire, which also badly damaged the structure. Even today, visitors say her blurry white apparition is still dressed in her wedding gown and can be seen on nights with full moons. Next up at number 9 now, we have the Wildwood Cemetery. They say that there are 2 sides to this cemetery, a light side and a dark side, split right down the middle. When night comes, which side is which becomes very clear. On the light side, it's said that you can see fairies. Yeah, actual fairies. They won't harm you at all. On the bad side though, things are very bad. People have reported seeing hellish creatures. A famous one is the Shrieking Banshee, who won't stop wailing until you leave the cemetery. Some have reported hearing voices and banging coming from tombs which were sealed a long time ago. There's a statue there that's said to cry and change positions at night. There's also a large mausoleum designed by a fireman who was so scared of being buried alive when he died in case he came back to life, he designed it so that it could be opened from the inside but not the outside. Well, locals have reported seeing it open and close, and I think you know what they're thinking. Moving on to number 8 now, we have the Goblin of Easton. This is a well-known Pennsylvanian ghost story. This is a retelling by S.E. Schlosser from AmericanFolklore.net. There was once a monk at the mission who loved money and power more than he loved God. He would hear the confession of the good folk who attended the mission and then would blackmail them into giving him gold and silver to keep their darkest secrets. He turned away a wayward sinner's feet towards the fires of hell rather than the gates of heaven, encouraging their crimes in secret while he reviled them in public. It was after he that the evil monk was imprisoned and sentenced for his crime. crimes. But just after he was cut down from the noose and pronounced dead, his corpse began to transform before the horrified eyes of the people. The face twisted and small tusks sprang from either side of his nose. His shock of white hair grew long and greasy, and two pointed canines emerged from his slit of a mouth. The goblin monk opened eyes that glowed yellow even in the light of the noonday, and sprang to feet that now ended in claws rather than toes. The people screamed and fled, and no prayer of his former brothers in faith could banish the goblin. It disappeared deep into the forest, only to return at night and prey upon the monks of the mission who had been responsible for his death. After 5 of the brothers had fallen to the goblin, the rest of the monks abandoned the mission and moved to another part of the country. Since that time, the mission house has slowly fallen into ruin. Next up at number 7 now, we have the 7 Gates of Hell. Pelham Township was founded in 1739 in York, Pennsylvania. On the surface, it looks like a pleasant little town, but legend says that it features 7 portals to hell. In the 19th century, there was said to be a fire at an asylum which allowed dangerous inmates to escape. Many of them were recaptured. Other souls were trapped inside a series of gates which they still haunt to this day. The first gate is actually visible by daylight, but the others require night. By passing through all 7, a person can end up in hell. Locals say that nobody has ever passed through 5 portals and lived to tell the tale. That might sound like a record that needs to be beaten, but I would advise against it. Moving on to number 6 now, we have the Bus to Nowhere. This is a more modern urban legend that tells a tale of sorrow, depression, getting lost and never being found again. Legend says that in Philadelphia there is a bus that appears only to those left distraught and alone after an awful tragedy has happened in their lives. Perhaps their family was killed in an accident that left them totally alone in this world without a shoulder to cry on. In their darkest moment, the bus will appear to them. The person will get on and see other passengers staring out of the window as if in a trance. The bus promises to take you away from your pain so that you never have to feel it again. That's who the passengers are, people who chose the bus over their own painful reality. If you don't remember to pull the cord though before it's too late, the bus will add you to its permanent residence. Once a passenger gets off, they will have no memory of their time on the bus, but the memory and the bus could return for them once more. Next up at number 5 now, we have Congelia Mansion. This is often referred to as one of the most haunted houses in America. In 1871, the mistress of the house discovered that her husband had been cheating on her with their maid. She flew into a rage and stabbed her husband to death. However, she seemed to have saved most of her wrath for the maid, whose head she cut off. After the brutal murders, the house was vacant for about 20 years. Nobody wanted to own it. Anyone who tried to live there would soon leave due to the creepy sounds of a woman sobbing and occasionally screaming. At the turn of the century, the house was bought by a doctor. Now, he seemed normal at first, but eventually locals found out he was using the house as a base for his twisted experiments on both the living and the dead. The reputation of this dark house grew so much that even Thomas Edison came to study it. In 1927, it was destroyed in a gas explosion. That hasn't stopped paranormal investigators from visiting it though, who believe that dark energy can still be found there. Coming in at number 4 now, we have Charlie No Face. This is also known as the Legend of the Green Man. In West Pennsylvania, many years ago, a boy called Charlie climbed a high electric pole to try and see into a bird's nest. He got tangled up in the cables though and was horribly electrocuted. He fell to the ground. His friends ran over and immediately they started screaming. Charlie's face had practically melted. All of his features were gone. His eyes, nose, mouth and ear, and even one of his arms. The electrocution had also turned his skin a sort of pale green colour. The doctors thought he would die that night, but Charlie survived. He led a tragic life though and was feared by his own community just because of how he looked. As a man, Charlie took to living in abandoned houses in the town. Local teenagers would walk down the highways near his home hoping to see him. It wasn't until after he died that people realized that Charlie No Face was partially based on the true story of Ray Robinson. I suggest googling that name if you want to find out more. Next up at number 3 now, we have the Storm Hag. Now, according to legend, a demon lives close to Presque Isle Peninsula and she's called the Storm Hag. She is hideous with yellow eyes that shine in the dark like a cat, pale green skin and sharp pointed teeth which she uses to peel the skin off her victims. The teeth are also green, giving her a less commonly used name of Jenny Greenteeth. That name fell out of use some years later. Her hands have long pointed nails nails like talons that have a poison which he uses to paralyze a poor soul with one small prick. Escape is impossible for her victims due to her long, strong arms which wrap around them. Legend says that before a siren like an attack, she sings a song over the waves which only a few have survived to retell. Come into the water, love, she sings, dance beneath the waves, where dwell the bones of sailor lads inside my saffron caves. Coming at number 2 now, we have Blue Mist Road. That's the name given to Irwin Road in Gibsonia. Locals say that on most nights you can find a deep blue mist that washes over the path. It was originally a dirt trail from the 1800s, and even to this day it's still not been paved. There are ruins of houses along this road. One of them was said to be owned by a witch who would open portals to dark dimensions on a daily basis. It's also said that the KKK had bases around there, using it for lynchings and rituals. This only added to the evil vibe of the place. According to legend, if a person drives up the dirt part of the road which is blocked off and honks their horn 3 times, they can summon the spirits of the dead, who will make noises, appear as balls of light, or sometimes even materialize as full apparitions. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Devil's Road. In southeastern Pennsylvania, on the Delaware border, lies the Devil's Road. On a map, it's called Cossart Road. Legend says it's where the Cult House is, once owned and operated by the wealthy DuPont family. Now their Stone Mansion housed a cult group which locals believe was host to all manner of rituals and ceremonies. One of them is thought to have been a ceremony to marry their own cousins so that wealth would stay in their family. Ugh. There have always been strange occurrences around Cult House. A stretch of trees on the road face away from the home. This is not natural. They're said to face away even if it means getting less light from the sun, so what darkness lies in that house? Other trees in the area resemble skulls and are said to have been dumping grounds for unwanted babies. The tree then grows into the shape of their skull. People who go to investigate the mysteries are often met with no trespassing signs or chased away by guards driving huge black trucks. The road and house have gained such a reputation that M. Night Shyamalan chose to film The Village there. A little bit of trivia for all you horror fans.
Number 10. Casa de Estudio. An old church slash school slash town hall built in the 1800s. This place is a prime time ghost spot. It's said to be one of the most haunted places in the whole world, even more than my love life. There's a lot of ghosts here. People have claimed to see many different ghostly figures roaming around the area. But mainly 2 take the cake. There's a mother and her daughter who are often seen walking around together. The daughter always seems to be upset or crying. The other is an older man who is very aggressive towards kids and anyone who wears any sort of religious symbols. My guess is he's still sticking around the old place because he's on a one-way ticket to hell. There has also been loads of people who say they can hear voices at night. Also strange noises and even smell perfume. Just because you're dead doesn't mean you don't want to feel pretty. Spray the perfume, girl. Number 9. Cosmopolitan Hotel. This place was the biggest banger spot in San Diego back in the 1800s. It was owned by the Bandinis and known for the huge ragers Mr. Bandini would throw there. But now it's one of the most haunted places in San Diego. After Mr. Bandini's death, the house was sold and turned into a hotel. I'm assuming Mr. Bandini died in the home and his ghost still haunts the place. If I was him, I would be pissed. Like, no more sick parties, only people sleeping? Lame AF. But there have been numerous sightings of ghosts, as well as rooms rearranging themselves and items going missing. Ooh. There have even been EVP recordings that are said to be Mr. Bandini himself. Number 8. Glass tile sidewalk. So there are areas in San Diego that have glass tile sidewalks. Underneath you can see tunnels which go all over San Diego. The logical answer behind this is they're a cool artsy twist on making a sidewalk. But we're not here for artsy, we're here for urban legends. There's a few urban legends for this see-through sidewalk. The first is that the government has been using the tunnels as a way to perform secret experiments, mainly on homeless people. So if you're homeless, don't hitchhike over to San Diego unless you want to meet your end in some underground lair. The second is similar to the first, but involves aliens. Basically the same thing, but it's actually aliens who are using the tunnels and not government scientists. For anyone who's seen the movie Us, you know that secret underground layers with a whole bunch of weird experiments happening in them is very terrifying. Number 7. The Chulapa Monster. A creature that walks on all fours, it feeds on chickens and goats and sometimes even people. This thing's basically a discount version of the Chupacabra. You know when your mom would come home with with fruit rings instead of Fruit Loops? That's exactly what we have here. The chulapa basically does the same thing as the chupacabra, but the one-up that the chulapa has on the chupacabra is that it's actually been seen on camera. A surfer was catching some waves one day when he came across this beast laying on the beach. Now there's been a lot of speculation as to what this creature is. Most people say it's a dog or a possum that got caught in the ocean. Because of all the water in its body, it expanded and that's why it looks so large. But I'm gonna stand strong and say this is a mythical beast and we should all be very afraid. Number 6, the blob. Back in the 1980s, there was a huge petroleum buildup underneath San Diego. If the government hadn't done anything about this, it probably would have been an environmental disaster of epic proportions. They nicknamed this deadly thing the blob. They thought the blob was going to explode and destroy most of the downtown area while also devastating the ecosystem. It ended up being handled and nobody was harmed. But the legend goes that this thing wasn't a petroleum buildup, but some believe that the blob was an experiment gone wrong. That somewhere deep in the underbelly of San Diego, someone was working on a weapon that would consume an entire city. Kind of like the slime monsters from Dragon Quest, but not so cute. This one was made to suffocate you and turn your body into fuel. The rumor goes that this weaponized blob was made by the American government, and the way it was supposed to be used was by firing it into a major populated area. The blob then hatches, angry and confused, like someone with a Sunday morning hangover, and then starts eating everything, also like someone with a Sunday morning hangover. Everything it consumes also then gets turned into petroleum, which is then used for fuel. Is this true? Probably not, but it's fun to speculate. Number 5, the Mission Hill Park bodies. What's the number one rule about cemeteries? Don't build anything on top of them. Haven't you guys seen Poltergeist? If you build something on top of a cemetery, it will cause ghosts to mess with you, which will have devastating effects on your sleep cycle, and you better believe that I need my beauty sleep. Well, the people who were in charge of picking new parks in San Diego didn't care about this rule when they decided to put the Mission Hill Park right on top of a cemetery. So that's nice. Let's go to a park, let's have a picnic, maybe when we're done we could dig up a few bodies. What a great first date. No, I haven't been to the Mission Hill Park, and I think if I get the time off, I'm gonna suggest we go to Chick-fil-A instead. But apparently there's still some tombstones at the park. So if you're ever feeling lonely, you could always head over to this park, cuddle up to one of these grave sites, and read a nice book. As creepy as this sounds, the ghosts would probably love the company. Number 4, the Little Girl of El Monte Road. Ghosts creep me out most of the time, but there's something about a little girl ghost that creeps me out way more. The Little Girl of El Monte Road is a brutal, horrifying story. Racism in the US has always been an extremely huge problem, and back in the 1950s, it would have been a very scary time to be a black citizen. The story goes that one night, a young black girl was walking home from school when several men in pickup trucks started following her. She tried to run, but they chased her down and tied her up and then threw her in the back of one of the trucks. They then drove to a tree just off of El Monte Road and hung her there. It said that on a quiet night you can hear the girl screaming for help, and if you drive down the road and come across this tree, stop right before you pass it. Flash your headlights and you'll see a little girl's ghost run across the street. Terrifying. Number 3, the Haven Bakery. Usually a bakery is a happy place. It's the kind of place I like to go to a cheat day and eat so many carbs I feel sick and guilty. That way I won't crave carbs until my next cheat day. I should probably learn some self-control. Anyways, the Haven Bakery is actually just outside of San Diego. The story goes that it was run by a family, a husband and wife, and occasionally they got help from their daughter. One day the husband went down to the basement to get some supplies and he found his daughter hanging from the ceiling. This sent him into a psychotic rage. He then killed his wife and then killed himself. It's said that if you visit the bakery, you can hear footsteps all throughout the building. Some people say there was a ghostly woman that would walk around the outside of the building wearing a white dress. And the most intense thing I read about this place is that bloody handprints would pop up all over the walls. But unless you've already been, you can't go. The government demolished this place back in 2009. If you want a wedding cake made by a ghost, you need to pray to the demon that keeps Martha Stewart looking the same. Number 2, Proctor Valley Road. What I'm learning about San Diego is if you try to walk, drive, or sleep anywhere in the city, you might run into some sort of horrible ghost creature who wants to ruin your day. For anyone planning a trip over there, I would suggest stopping to watch the Chargers game and then continuing south to the border to one one of those Mexican border cities. They're probably safer, or at least there won't be anything creepy lurking around like the stuff on Proctor Valley Road. Proctor Valley Road is a long dirt road about 25 miles east of central San Diego, and it has been home to all sorts of strange paranormal activity. There's been floating blue orbs in the mountain. Several people have said they've seen this giant blue orb in the sky. It'll just hover and then disappear. The most common conspiracy theory is that it's some sort of UFO. Do you think aliens come here like the zoo? They bring their kids and they're like, look at that one, it's driving while eating at the same time. Wow, so smart. Another alarming critter running around the Proctor Valley Road is the lady in white. It's said that a ghostly woman dressed in all white has been standing at the side of the road. No wonder she hasn't moved on. She's dressed in all white next to a dirt road. You can't show up to the afterlife looking like a used Kleenex. Huh. And number 1 on our list, the Proctor Valley Monster. Ooh, this is a big boy. There have been sightings of the Proctor Valley Monster for over 40 years. It's said to be 7 feet tall, hairy with glowing red eyes, and loves to eat people. There have been cases of people being mauled to death just outside their cars with the windows smashed in. It would take something big enough to smash the car windows and smart enough to pull them out of the cars. Some of the people who've dug into finding out what exactly this creature is think it could be some sort of Bigfoot creature or someone's drunk uncle who's just on the loose. For any of you who are skeptical on this one, we got a 911 phone call from someone who had an encounter with the beast in their front yard. Number 10, the Lemp Mansion. If you're some sort of beer nerd, you probably know about the Lemp Mansion. The Lemp family was one of the original kingpins when it came to making beer back at the beginning of the 20th century in America. They were wealthy, they lived in a huge mansion, and they seemed to have it all until one day their son was found dead. Over the next few decades, 5 Lemp family members would. It's said that even with all their success, the family was cursed. The worst of these being the eldest Lemp's son, who shot his dog before shooting himself. Dude, what the hell? Leave the dog out of this. If this dude didn't put a John Wick would have kicked in the door and done it for him. Now the Lemp family mansion operates as a restaurant and tourist attraction. If you're ever feeling like you want to pee your bed while you're staying in St. Louis, you can also check into the Lemp mansion as a hotel. I think I'd rather take my chances with sleeping on the streets. Thank you very much. Number 9, the Momo. We're not talking about that creepy chain letter that was sent around to all those kids, where some creepy face, where a disturbing face would tell today's youth to jump off of buildings. No, not that at all. But this one is equally as twisted. It just hasn't had the same amount of press. The Missouri Momo is a 7-foot tall creature covered in head to toe with hair. Reports say that it has so much hair on its head you can't see its face, like some sort of emo kid who has taken the depressing bangs way too far. It's also said to have glowing orange eyes and 3-fingered toad-like hands and feet. Story from people who have encountered this ape-man said that it won't attack humans, but it will kill animals. One sighting said they saw a huge, hairy creature that looked like it was half man and half ape and was carrying a dead dog under its arm. Well, at least we know how we can find this thing now. Once John Wick is done double killing the ghost of the Lemp son who shot his dog, he can come back to our world and beat the hell out of this dog-killing Bigfoot knockoff. Number 8, Zombie Road. This sounds like a place you go to blow off steam after the zombie apocalypse happens. Like, hey, let's go down to Zombie Road and bash some of those slow walkers in with a baseball bat. Well, unfortunately, Zombie Road isn't a fun time for you and the boys. It's one of America's most haunted roads. This site is home to one of the biggest Native American burial mounds in all of North America. This is like a ghost metropolis. There's so many ghosts here that you have to pull a number before you scare anybody. It's said that the road is named after a serial killer who was dubbed the Zombie Killer. He would hide out in a cabin close to the road and find young lovers who are just looking for some privacy and then kill them. Dude, some people are just here trying to lose their virginities and you kill them? That's one of the rudest things I think I've ever heard. Apparently there is also a famous ghost which haunts these parts. Dalla Hamilton McGowan was a judge and winner of the Most Old-Timey Name Award. He was hit by a train one day, probably after buying mustache wax, and now his ghost floats around these parts. Number 7, the Jefferson Park Cemetery. We've always got to throw a cemetery or two on the list. It's where all the top shelf spooky stuff happens. The Jefferson Park Cemetery is home to a few famous ghosts. There's a little girl who's been seen walking from headstone to headstone, running her fingers along the top of them. People who have seen the phantom youngster say she's usually whistling a song. It's almost like she's playing in the cemetery, having a great time. There have also been sightings of two ghosts who appear in opposing Civil War uniforms. These two dueling deathwalkers pop up around sundown. Most of us here probably think they pop up and fight for eternity, but apparently they just tip their hat at one another and move on. I guess after being dead for over 100 years, it really helps you meditate on things. Also, I love the hat tip. I didn't realize ghosts have a black eye head nod. Number 6. The Exorcist House. For those of you who don't know the blockbuster hit The Exorcist, it was based on an actual demonic possession. It was a young boy named Roland Doe who decided to play with the Ouija board and then got possessed by a bunch of demons. When you buy a Ouija board, there should really be a warning on the side. Like, side effects include vomiting, screaming, scratches appearing on your body and face, demonic possession, renouncing Christ, erectile dysfunction, all those things. Now, Roland didn't get possessed in St. Louis, but his family went to seek help from other family members in St. Louis. You can still go visit the place. It's said that when you walk into the home, it feels like something's wrong, like you can feel evil in the walls. There have been reports of people having vicious nightmares after leaving. Just go to Bali for vacation. Get drunk on a beach. Don't go somewhere where you might get possessed. Demonic possession is worse for your skin than sun damage. Number 5. The Alexis Brothers Hospital. So the exorcism we were just talking about, well, the boy stayed in the house with his extended family, but the actual exorcism itself took place in the Alexis Brothers Hospital. Could you imagine being in the hospital because you have a cold and in the bed next to you some guy's getting several demons exorcised out of his body? Like, can I move to another bed please? I'm having a really hard time sleeping with someone yelling in tongues and his vomit is splashing on me. It said after the demons were pulled out of Roland Doe's body, they shut down the room permanently, locking the door and never putting another patient inside it. Legend goes that when nurses would walk by the door, they would hear scratches and whispering. One doctor said he saw a pair of bloody eyes staring at him through the glass in the door. Unfortunately, if you ever wanted to check this urban legend to see if it holds up, you can't. They demolished the hospital. I think that's a good policy. If you ever find a ghost or demon in your home or establishment, just burn the whole thing to the ground. Start again. Number 4. The Devil's Wine Box. When first reading this thing, I thought it was gonna be a really good time. I mean, if anyone knows how to party, it's the devil. I'm sure his wine box is full of amazing ways to get wasted and make sure you make a bunch of choices you'll regret in the morning. But sadly, there's no such luck with this one. The Devil's Wine Box is an artifact that is supposed to have an insane level of bad mojo around it. The movie Drag Me to Hell is based on this little box of horrors. It can curse anyone who interacts with it, leading to possibly endless misfortune. It's said that the current owner of the Devil's Wine Box brought it to the set of Drag Me to Hell while they were filming. On more than one occasion, lights short-circuited and exploded, and props burned to the ground. The owner offered it to anyone on set who would like to take it, but everyone was like, hell no! Like, yeah, why don't I borrow this live grenade with a loose-fitting pin while I'm at it? Number 3. The Bubbleheads. One of the creepiest ones of all time is the Bubbleheads. Up around Carico Road is a house that is far tucked away. Deep in the woods, there's a family that lives there that apparently kills anyone that gets too close. The urban legend behind the Bubblehead goes a few different ways. Some say that they were tested on by the government and then sent into the hills of Missouri as a way to hide them away from the public. Others say that years and years of inbreeding have caused them to become deformed and violent. That's why you should never date anyone who looks too much like you. No matter the case, you can definitely determine that they are very ugly. Apparently their heads are the size of inflated watermelons, and they have freakish strength. Basically, the hills have eyes. The moral of this story, don't go camping in Missouri. Not unless you want to end up being beat to death by someone who looks like they walked out of a Gushers commercial. Number 2. Molly Crenshaw. One of the most famous ghost stories in the St. Louis area. There's a few different renditions of this urban legend. One says she was a voodoo priestess back in the 1800s, who the villagers had hung after she was blamed for causing a bad crop with her witchcraft. Another where she would cast voodoo spells on people before she would murder them. But they all end the same way, with her putting a curse over her grave, threatening that anyone who touches her grave would die a horrible death. In the legend, it says that the villagers were so afraid of her that they chopped her body into quarters so that she could never rise again. That's the kind of respect I want to command in the afterlife. I want people to know that I'm so ruthless that they better dismember my corpse or I'm gonna come back and take on revenge on everyone who blue shelled me in Mario Kart. For our number 1 that we have on our list of urban legends, you can actually read about this in the history books. It's about Emily Grant Hutchings. She was quite an accomplished author and avid spiritualist. One night she had a bunch of ladies over for a spiritualist girls night. You know, martinis, gossip, and of course a Ouija board. Well, while the ladies were trying to contact the other side, they apparently got in touch with the famous dead writer Mark Twain. He reached out to them because he died an unsatisfied man and still had a book to put out. And the reason he reached through the astral planes because he wanted Emily to ghostwrite a book for him. The legend goes that she spent the next few months writing down letter by letter every letter that Mark Twain's ghost signaled through the Ouija board. And the finalized book was Jap Heron, which was a massive flop. The people called the book unreadable. She was even sued by Mark Twain's family. I like to think that after the reviews came out, Mark Twain contacted Emily one more time to be like, hey, sorry about that. My mistake for ruining your image. I'm gonna go back to being dead.